Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something, well, a little melty. Picture this, a grand banquet in an open-air courtyard, the moon full, casting soft silver light on polished limestone. Laughter drifts lazily through the air, mingling with the low thump of drums and the heady perfume of myrrh. At the center of it all, nobility recline on cushions, dressed in white linen, golden cuffs glinting under torchlight. And on their heads, little wax cones, not crowns, not headdresses. Wax cones just chilling there, melting, on purpose. You probably wouldn't last 5 minutes with hot perfume dripping down your scalp. But hey, these ancient elites, they lived for it, literally. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to hear where and when you're listening. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step softly across the flagstones of ancient Memphis, the scent of blue lotus drifting through the warm air. Flickering brazier crackles nearby, casting shifting shadows across the marble feet of a forgotten statue. Your sandals whisper with each step. You're not in a museum, not looking at dusty artifacts behind glass. You're there, and on, every head around you. A little wax cone is making a slow, dignified descent into liquid. You don't ask why at first. You assume it's just fashion, but then you notice something. Wherever the wax melts, it doesn't stain. It glistens. It perfumes the air. It clings to hair and skin like silk soaked in roses and honey. People lean in toward each other to catch a stronger whiff. It's not just a hat. It's a message. These hats are scented, a blend of sacred oils and natural waxes shaped into a soft, cone-like mound, set atop the head at banquets and ceremonies. Over the hours, body heat and ambient warmth melt the wax, releasing perfume that fills the air like a spell. It's not an accident. It's status. The Pharaohs' court wasn't just about gold and architecture. It was a kingdom of scent. If you smelled like blue lotus and frankincense, it meant you had access to the finest temples, the best artisans. If your wax cone was made with imported myrrh or a hint of cinnamon from far-off lands, you weren't just rich, you were important. And unlike today, where perfume fades into the background or lingers on a wrist, this was an act, a performance. Scent didn't just happen. It unfolded, one layer then another. As the wax melted, it revealed deeper aromas hidden inside. You'd start the evening smelling like citrus and amber, but by midnight, you're a walking poem of spice, smoke, and exotic flowers. Your presence lingered even after you left, like a signature no one could copy. Of course, not everyone loved the idea. Some scribes from Thebes wrote scathingly about perfumed fools who wear their vanity on their heads, claiming it distracted from proper ritual. Others embraced it as a divine tribute, a physical offering, melting like incense to the gods. And if you're wondering whether these were just for women, absolutely not. In fact, some of the most obsessively perfumed people were high priests, generals, even scribes. These weren't delicate little flower cones, they were power hats, aromatic declarations. The ancient version of wearing Gucci in a room full of people who can't even pronounce it. You pause to watch a nobleman pass. His wax hat glistens in the moonlight, streaks of rose oil tracing along his temples like war paint. His head tilts just slightly, ensuring the scent trails behind him with every step. His servant walks 2 paces back, carrying a second cone, just in case the first one melts too quickly. You chuckle softly. Luxury problems, huh? And here's the odd thing. Despite centuries of excavations, we haven't found a single surviving wax hat. What we know comes from paintings, tomb inscriptions, and faint chemical traces on burial cloths. Some researchers still debate whether these cones were ever worn regularly at all, or if they were symbolic, shown in art but not in life. But then again, maybe that's part of the magic. A kind of ancient performance art, equal parts ritual and ridiculousness, like wearing a designer raincoat in a desert just to prove you can. So you keep walking, down an avenue lined with statues of falcons and lions. The night air is heavy, with heat and history. Somewhere nearby, a harpist plucks a soft melody. The cone on your own head, yes, you're wearing one now, begins to soften, and a drop of vanilla-scented wax slips past your ear. You flinch. It's hot, but not painful. More like being kissed by the sun. You wonder, just for a moment, what your scent says about you. Are you royal, sacred, or just trying to impress the person reclining 2 pillows away? A dragonfly hovers near your shoulder, then darts off into the dark. Maybe it too is chasing the scent, and you're just getting started, because tonight we're diving deep into the perfumed politics, sensual ceremonies, and floral warfare of one of the strangest fashion statements in human history. And trust me, it only gets weirder from here. You settle in among silk cushions that exhale sandalwood with every sigh. The banquet has just begun, and the air is thick, not with noise but with quiet luxury. Bronze bowls shimmer with dates and figs. A jug of pomegranate wine glows like stained glass in the firelight. Someone plays a stringed instrument softly, lazily, like they're plucking the tension out of the room one note at a time. But what you can't ignore, not anymore, is the scent. It's not just the hat on your head, slowly melting its concoction of spikenard and sweet resins. It's everywhere, behind every breeze, weaved into every conversation. A man walks by and you catch a whiff of something smoky and floral. A woman laughs nearby, and the air around her flutters with cinnamon and crushed orange peel. It's like breathing in a memory you never had. This isn't a coincidence. This is the Pharaoh's obsession. You glance toward the high table. There, reclining with effortless authority, is the ruler of the 2 lands, crowned in gold, skin shimmering with oil, and yes, wearing a wax cone more elaborate than any other. His cone is pale ivory with embedded petals of blue lotus and streaks of hardened amber. It doesn't just drip, it glows. Pharaohs weren't just rulers, they were gods in human form. And gods, of course, must never stink. Not from sweat, not from labor, not even from the desert wind. Cleanliness was holiness, and scent, that was the invisible halo, the sign that you were more than mortal. You begin to realize this isn't just vanity, it's theology. The pharaoh must smell divine. His presence must cleanse a space, elevate it, bless it. So yes, he wore perfume, but not like you do, not behind the ears or on the collar. He wore it like a crown, like an atmosphere. You hear whispers from the priests nearby. The sacred oils used in the royal cone took months to blend. Some were stirred by candlelight for days on end to coax the fragrance awake. Others were harvested only during moonless nights, crushed between marble stones while chanting hymns to Bastet. A royal perfumer, yes, that was a real job, could command the respect of generals. One misstep in a blend, one drop of the wrong resin, and you might offend not only the pharaoh but the gods themselves. Try explaining to Osiris why you showed up smelling like burnt thyme. One perfumer, legend says, went blind from overexposure to frankincense vapors and still kept working, composing scents by memory and heat alone. His signature scent? A blend of cedarwood, papyrus root, and tears of myrrh. It was said to make hardened soldiers cry when they caught the faintest trace. You find yourself staring at your own hands. They glisten faintly from the oil rubbed in. Earlier, you sniff your wrist, lotus, yes, but there's also something spicy, almost peppery. You didn't choose it. Someone did that for you. A servant handed it to you and said only, "For where you're sitting tonight." Wait. Your scent was assigned? Of course it was. This is a court, a theater. Every whiff is choreography. Some historians still argue whether pharaohs truly cared this much, or whether this was all an elaborate indulgence by the elite. But others insist that the records are clear. Entire sections of royal archives were devoted to formulas, batch numbers, scent pairings by season and phase of the Nile. This wasn't a hobby. It was a national obsession. Even the tomb inscriptions say as much. In one of the oldest burial chambers in Thebes, there's a mural of a noblewoman with a wax cone on her head, sitting beside a tree. The scent cone melts as birds gather around her, as if lured by the smell. She smiles, eyes closed, arms open, like she's being received into paradise not with trumpets but with perfume. The message was clear. Smell divine now, and you'll be welcomed later. And that's why even the poorest families saved up to buy burial cones for their loved ones. A tiny blob of scented wax placed on the forehead or breast, a fragrant passport to the next life. You wonder if they worked, if anyone ever sniffed their way into heaven. Your cone drips again. A little wax trickles past your temple, leaving a warm trail like sunlight on skin. You don't wipe it away. You're starting to get it now. The Pharaoh, lounging in his perfumed aura, sips from a cup etched with falcons. His cone is almost gone, but no one brings him a new one. He's had enough. The scent will linger for hours. And that's the point. You lean back, letting your eyes drift half-closed. The music shifts key. The harpist begins a slower rhythm. The scent around you is changing again. You smell pine or maybe cedar with a hint of dried fig. You're not sure what it means, but you feel calmer. Someone nearby murmurs, "He's wearing the rebirth blend." You don't ask questions. You just breathe, and you wonder, if power can be measured in how long your fragrance stays in the room after you leave, then how powerful were these kings who scented not just a room, but an entire civilization? You're not asleep yet, but you're getting close. The banquet lingers like the scent in the air, slow, dreamy, and utterly unapologetic. You shift slightly on your cushion, the linen sticking gently to your skin where the wax has begun to cool. Someone refills your cup. Someone else fans the Pharaoh. But you're listening. Not just to the music or the hum of conversation, but to the whispers of history that swirl just beneath the surface. You're about to learn something unusual. Those fragrances filling the air tonight, they weren't bought. They weren't found. They were made. And where were they made? Not in merchant shops, not in back alley stalls, but in vast, almost mythical compounds known as perfume palaces. You blink slowly, picturing it now, a sprawling, sun-drenched estate beyond the city walls. High gates, guards, and an intoxicating haze hanging in the air. Inside, women in linen robes stir enormous clay vessels with wooden paddles. Fragrant steam curls from giant pots. You hear the plop-plop of resin dripping into oil and the dry whisper of flower petals crumbling under stone rollers. Here, in these palaces, scent is alchemy. You're not imagining it. These were real places, staffed by temple workers and guarded like gold reserves. Only the most trusted and most olfactorily gifted were allowed near the royal blends. Recipes were inscribed on palm bark, hidden in clay jars, and sometimes spoken only aloud to a single heir before the previous master died. And here's where it gets odd, or wonderful, or both. You see, some of the ingredients they use, downright baffling. The base for one blend might include fat from a Nile crocodile, prized for how smoothly it held the fragrance. Another used ground ostrich shell for spiritual stability. One elite cone even boasted essence of snow from the mountains, which you should note is impressive, since Egypt doesn't have any. Of course you wonder, were these just poetic names for herbs and oils? Maybe. Or maybe the ancient perfumers were like modern chefs naming desserts after comets and heartbreaks. Half flair, half madness. One story whispers of a scent made only for funerals, called Descent into the West. It smelled of cedar, ash, and salt. Supposedly, it was so potent it could cause even stoic men to weep. It was banned from temples because it made priests forget the words to their hymns. You find yourself asking, how could something invisible be so powerful? Even now, scholars argue over how these perfumes were made. Some say they were fermented like wine, aged in amphorae buried in sand to ripen the spirit. Others believe sound was used, that the blends were sung to, chanted over, believing the vibration shaped the scent. A few academics scoff, calling it mysticism. But then again, maybe they've never smelled rebirth blend under a starlit sky. Voice nearby murmurs, "That's Princess Neferu's blend, isn't it?" You turn your head. A woman passes by, her cone adorned with tiny flecks of gold leaf that catch the firelight. The wax melts down her neck like warm honey. Her scent? Sandalwood, green almond, and something sharper, like citrus from a tree you've never seen. People lean in. They always do. You're beginning to understand the hierarchy here. Titles and robes are just the beginning. But your scent? That tells people who you are, what gods you favor, and what kind of story they're allowed to imagine about you. You wonder, did children in these perfume palaces grow up with noses more trained than eyes? Did they play guessing games blindfolded, identifying oils by a single breath? You imagine one girl, tiny hands stirring a pot too big for her arms, whispering, "This smells like the riverbank after the rains," and her master nodding solemnly, "Yes, that's exactly right." You smile. Some truths don't need science, they just need noses. But not everything was poetic. Perfume was politics. These palaces weren't just sacred, they were strategic. The priestesses here had power. Some blends were reserved for specific temples or festivals. Others were gifted to visiting rulers, or withheld as subtle insults. Denying someone a scent could be more cutting than raising a blade. There's a story of one queen who sent a rival a cone scented with bitter herbs and spoiled honey. A warning wrapped in wax. The rival never responded. But 2 months later, her palace caught fire under mysterious circumstances. Coincidence? Maybe. But in a land ruled by symbols, even perfume can be a weapon. You glance back at the pharaoh. His scent has shifted again. Darker now, muskier, with a flicker of incense. Maybe he's preparing for something or someone. You sit up slightly. The air has changed. And you realize, you don't just smell like someone now. You feel like someone. The wax cone has melted down your shoulders. The oils have soaked into your skin. And with them, the stories, the myths, the power. You're not watching the ritual anymore. You're part of it. And as the stars wheel silently above the Nile, and the scent of jasmine rides the midnight breeze, you begin to wonder what else the perfume palaces are hiding. Because this is just the surface. The real secrets are deeper, stronger, stranger, and you're about to follow them. A breeze slips through the columns, rustling the sheer linen hangings like the soft breath of a curious spirit. You shift your weight and feel a new warmth on the back of your neck. Another trickle of wax, this one thicker, almost syrupy. It carries a scent you can't quite name. Figs, smoked mint, a hint of something metallic like rain on stone. You inhale again. It's deliberate. And that's the secret no one tells you up front. These wax cones weren't just accessories. They were performances, sculptures, timed events. You weren't just wearing a smell. You were wearing a story that melted. It starts with the shape, always conical. Soft at the tip, broader at the base. Not just because it looked elegant, but because it melted predictably. Gravity and body heat did the work, drawing the scent downward in slow, sensual ribbons, never rushing, never abrupt. Like a good conversation, it unspooled itself in layers. You watch a servant cross the room, carefully balancing a tray of fresh cones. He moves with reverence, as if carrying living creatures. Because he is, in a way. Each cone contains a blend with its own personality. Some begin sweet and end sharp. Others grow more bitter as they melt, like wine left out too long. And some change completely. As if the wax remembers a different story each time. There's a particular cone tonight, shaped slightly differently. More cylindrical than the others, with a faint marbling of black. You ask quietly. The servant smiles and whispers, "That's the nightshade blend." You blink. Nightshade? He leans in. Only the royal guards wear it, for late duties, keeps them alert. So even the cones have jobs. You're suddenly aware of the cone on your own head. How it's softened, curved like the sun beginning to rise. A drop hits your collarbone, warm and comforting, like someone pressing a secret into your skin. Nearby, laughter rises. You follow the sound. A young nobleman is performing a trick. He's timed his cone to melt into a pattern down his neck, forming Perfect lines, scented tattoos that disappear by morning. You hear someone sigh and say, "He always does that at solstice." The crowd claps softly, not too loud. That would disrupt the atmosphere. But there's admiration in the sound, because this is the art form of the elite, the controlled unraveling of scent. And yes, it was an art. Some cones took months to prepare. You didn't just mash flowers and pour wax. No, it had to be layered. A base of animal fat or beeswax. Then the essential oils, sometimes heated, sometimes sung to. Then the timing. How long should this cone take to reach the second note? You picture a man leaning over a scroll, squinting at charts of heat, breeze, and scalp temperature. It sounds ridiculous, because it is. But also, it's magnificent. This was a culture where even a hat had choreography. Some perfumes were nocturnal blends, designed to awaken only under moonlight. Others were sun cones, meant to react with UV rays for the full release. There are even rumors of storm blends, used only during thunder because the charge in the air supposedly altered the scent. No one can prove those ever existed, but the fact that someone believed they did, that's enough. And remember, these weren't just indulgences. They were social code. To wear a cone that melted too fast? Amateur. You clearly didn't know your body heat or wind conditions. To wear one that never melted? Arrogant. You were hoarding scent, and scent is meant to be shared. The perfect cone? It whispered its presence, left traces, started conversations. Like a good joke or a clever tattoo. You glance at your arm. A faint shimmer of oil has caught the light. Someone near you leans just slightly closer, pretending to reach for fruit. But you know, they're checking your scent. It's working. Across the courtyard, a priest leans into a brazier, letting the heat nudge his cone to life. A single drop forms and falls, sizzling on the coals. The air swells with a burst of cardamom and pine. You hear murmurs. Heads turn. And then there's the crown jewel, the layered cone. A rarity. Each section contains a different fragrance, activated as it melts downward. The top layer might be citrus. Midway through, sandalwood and rose. The base? Something spicy. Almost dangerous. Like clove dipped in wine. It's a countdown, a narrative, a wearable short story, and people paid dearly for it. You recall the tale of one vizier who spent a year's salary on a single cone for a New Year's ceremony. It was said to reveal the scent of the desert after rain. The cone melted slowly from evening to dawn, and when the last drop hit the ground, the Pharaohs stood and announced a new temple would be built. Cause and effect? Maybe. Or maybe the cone was simply that good. You settled deeper into your cushion, now aware that your own scent has shifted again. Something deeper now, woodier. Maybe this is the bass note they mentioned. You feel different, calmer, more grounded. You're no longer just someone at the banquet, you're part of its design. Because tonight isn't about food or power or even conversation. It's about presence. It's about how you linger. And as your wax hat performs its quiet dance, you realize something odd. You're not dreading the moment it finishes, you're looking forward to it. Because in this place, in this night, even endings are fragrant. The cone is almost gone now. You can feel it, not just by touch, but in the subtle hush of attention shifting elsewhere. As your scent softens into its final layer, your role in the invisible theater fades like the last stroke of a harp string. But you're not forgotten. No one is here. Because in ancient Egypt, even the way you smelled left a legacy. A nobleman walks past you and his scent is still developing. Sharper now, herbal and resinous. You catch just a hint of pine tar and myrrh and something burnt. You raise an eyebrow. A servant notices and leans in. He's wearing warrior's blend. It finishes in charred cedar and smoke. Very fashionable in Thebes right now. You're beginning to understand. Each of these cones doesn't just smell different. They tell a different story. And tonight you're about to witness one of the more dramatic chapters. How scent became status. How smelling good meant you were good. How fragrance became power. It started simple, of course. A nice scent meant you were clean. Being clean meant you were healthy. Being healthy meant you had the favor of the gods, but it didn't stay that simple for long. You glance across the garden and see two women greeting each other. They bow slightly, never touching, never speaking, just standing still for a moment. You watch them inhale. One of them tilts her head, smiles slightly, approval. The other bows lower, her wax cone releasing a soft floral finish just at the right moment. They've just completed a conversation entirely in scent, because here, social status isn't spoken aloud. It's wafted. There's even a term for it in old scripts. Nekeb rek, which loosely translates as aromatic rank. Your fragrance didn't just reflect your position, it defined it. A merchant might smell of oils mixed with local herbs. Lavender, basil, maybe a trace of mint. Respectable, familiar, but a noble. They wore imported frankincense, blue lotus, a whisper of cinnamon from a place you've never even heard of. These weren't just smells, they were signatures, access codes, invitations into rarefied air. And Pharaoh? He smelled like nothing else on earth. His scent was custom, blended by temple priests with ingredients so rare they could only be harvested during eclipses or in sacred groves. One blend even claimed to include the essence of moonlight soaked into crushed pearls. You don't ask how, you just accept it. Some of the cones even glowed slightly under torchlight, thanks to mica dust or powdered shell mixed into the wax. You see it now, the shimmer of power trailing behind a royal advisor as he passes, as if even the air knows to part in his wake. And this is where things get murky. You've probably guessed by now, not everyone had access to this fragrant elite class. The common people didn't get cones, they didn't even get oils most of the time. Maybe on festival days they could rub crushed herbs on their wrists or burn a little resin. But the cones, that was for them. The shining ones, the highborn, the sacred, or was it? Because as scent became power, people started to fake it. You overhear a conversation. Two guests whispering about a scandal last month. A merchant tried to sneak into a noble banquet wearing a cone scented with royal cassia oil, an ingredient reserved for the temple. He was outed halfway through the evening when someone recognized the pattern of the blend. Did they banish him? No, the woman replies, sipping wine. They made him stay. Let him finish the evening with his cone melting for all to smell, like a beetle pretending to be a falcon. You chuckle quietly. Harsh, but effective. The cones didn't just display wealth, they enforced hierarchy. If someone walked into a room wearing a scent they didn't earn, everyone would know. It was like showing up to a state dinner in a Halloween crown. You wouldn't just be noticed, you'd be remembered, forever. And so for those who couldn't afford the real thing, there were fakes. You pass a cluster of young men whispering over a tray of cones. One holds up a squat, uneven one and shrugs. It's tallow and crushed herbs, he says. It smells close enough. From across the room, who'll know? You don't say anything, you just move past them. But you make a note. The wax is already cracking. That cone won't last an hour. These scented hats weren't just olfactory indulgences. They were a system. A way to communicate class, connection, even courtship. Some historians still argue over how strict the rules really were. Were cones truly policed? Did the pharaohs care that much? But then again, when you rule a kingdom by divine right, every symbol matters. And a melting cone, radiating a scent crafted from sacred oils and rare herbs, might be the most potent symbol of all. As you lean back again, another drop of wax slides lazily along your jaw. The scent has mellowed to something soft and wistful, like warm linen after a summer rain. Someone smiles at you from across the room. They've noticed. For a moment you feel it. The power of being noticed, not for what you say or how you dress, but for the atmosphere you create just by being there. The music slows, the night deepens, and the scent of ambition, of status, of perfectly controlled elegance lingers on. You're not just a guest anymore, you're a story unraveling in perfume. The music dips low, almost imperceptible, like it's tucking itself under the murmurs of the banquet. You stretch slightly, and your linen tunic clings to the trace of wax on your shoulder. The cone on your head is nearly gone now, just a soft, fragrant puddle at the crown of your scalp, clinging like a memory that doesn't want to leave, but the evening is far from over. You shift your gaze toward the heart of the gathering, the banquet's central table, where the air seems thicker, richer. This is where the most powerful nobles recline, where every scent is sharper, more layered, and where tonight a new blend is making its debut. Someone leans toward you and whispers, "That one, the man in lapis blue robes? He's wearing Rain of Bastet. You don't recognize the name, not yet, but within moments you do recognize the effect." Heads turn, conversations lull. It's not because of how he looks, though he's dressed well, his hands jeweled, his expression proud. It's because the air around him just changed. You breathe in and feel it, something electric, cool and herbal, like mint stirred to honey or wet stone beneath sunlight. The scent is a contradiction, both cleansing and dangerous, and everyone notices. That's the power of a new scent in this world. It's not just perfume, it's disruption. You learn later that Rain of Bastet took 8 years to develop. 8. The ingredients were sourced from 4 kingdoms, including a flower that only bloomed during 1 week of spring in a mountain you've never heard of. The formula was guarded by a priestess who spoke only in riddles. Its final blend was approved in a temple ritual involving sacred cats, obsidian bowls, and, allegedly, a lightning strike. True? Who knows? But the story is part of the scent now. And that's what matters. Because in this society, a new fragrance is like launching a ship. It needs a name, a lineage, and perhaps most importantly, a moment. You don't just wear it, you unveil it. That's what's happening now. The nobleman knows the room is watching. He reclines slowly, tilts his head just enough to release the scent fully. The cone is shaped like a crescent moon, thin and elegant. It melts faster than the others, revealing a second note, warmer, almost peppery, like the flicker of a candle in a cool bath. Someone nearby exhales softly. "That's clever," they murmur. "It blooms in 2 stages. And you start to see it, the politics in the air. This isn't just fragrance, it's strategy, an aromatic flex." You hear someone chuckle. It's no accident he wore it tonight. Right after the temple vote, another responds, "Of course not, that's the scent of I told you so." You let out a quiet breath through your nose. So even perfume has timing. You watch others around the table shift subtly, adjusting their postures, reapplying oils, dabbing at wax cones that have begun to slide too quickly. One noblewoman pulls out a small stick, taps the edge of her cone, and rotates it ever so slightly, directing the melt like a gardener tending a vine. That's when it hits you. These people aren't just wearing perfume, they're conducting it. The banquet is a stage and scent is the spotlight. Each cone a solo performance with crescendos, harmonies, flourishes. You realize now, the most powerful person in the room isn't the one who talks the loudest. It's the one whose fragrance silences others. And then, oh, it gets better. You learn about scent pairings. Some nobles coordinate with their companions, wearing cones designed to complement or contrast each other, like musical duets. Tonight, you spot a couple seated side by side. One wears a cone that starts in citrus and ends in sandalwood, while the other moves from violet to smoke. As they lean together, the air between them becomes something new, something unique. They're not just sitting close, they're composing. You wonder, how long did it take them to plan that? Weeks? Months? There's even talk of one royal marriage arranged entirely by scent. The story goes that 2 heirs were seated at opposite ends of a banquet. Their cones mixed in the middle, and the scent was so beautiful, so strangely moving, that the pharaoh demanded they marry before dawn. "Do you think it's true?" you ask. A nearby guest shrugs. "Who cares? The scent was real." You glance up at the stars, bright and indifferent above the columns. You think about how, in your world, people talk about chemistry between lovers. Here, chemistry is literal, measured in wax and oil, and how long the aroma lingers on your pillow after they're gone. Another drop of wax traces the line of your ear. Your cone is in its final note now. a soft, sleepy base of benzoin and dried plum. It reminds you of distant fires, old papyrus scrolls, warm stone at sunset. It doesn't draw attention. It doesn't dazzle, but it lingers. And somehow that's enough. You don't have to dazzle every time. Sometimes it's the quiet scent that stays with people the longest, the one they can't quite name or forget. The sky above the courtyard has turned the color of deep ink, stars like salt tossed across black velvet. The torches flicker lower now, fed lazily by servants who move like shadows. You lean back on your cushion, aware of how your scent has changed yet again, quieter now, deeper. A little like a library that used to be a temple, and maybe that's fitting, because what you're about to hear next is the kind of thing whispered in corners of libraries, and only when the doors are closed. You see, not everyone believes the cones were just for beauty, or politics, or even social theater. Some believe they were medicine, yes, aromatherapy, ancient style. There's a priest seated near the outer wall, robe soft as fog, cone dark with streaks of silver. You recognize him. He was at the temple earlier, burning oils at the altar. Now he reclines, eyes half closed, the scent of his cone rising like a prayer. Sharp, herbal, almost medicinal. Someone beside you whispers, "He's wearing wisdom." Of Sekhmet. Helps with memory. You squint, curious. It turns out many of these blends were made with more than noses in mind. Some had crushed cloves to clear the lungs. Others had poppy essence. Not enough to put you to sleep, but enough to soften the edges of pain. One cone, rarely used and only during moon rituals, included henbane. That one would put you to sleep, deeply, possibly forever if not carefully prepared. You begin to realize these cones weren't just decorative. They were pharmaceuticals in a crown. The temples where perfumes were made, they weren't just laboratories of scent. They were early pharmacies. The perfumers were healers. They just happened to work through the nose instead of the mouth. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Smell is the fastest path to memory, to mood, to the brain. Even now in your time, people sniff lavender for calm or eucalyptus for clarity. Imagine a society where that idea was taken seriously enough to be carved in stone. One papyrus text, crumbling now but still legible, describes a cone of quieting, said to reduce grief during mourning rites. It blended cypress, frankincense, and date syrup, and was applied to the head during the final days of funeral processions. Some say the cone helped the bereaved cry. Others claim it helped them stop. And of course, the debates rage on. Scholars argue constantly, were these really used therapeutically? Or is this modern projection? Did the ancient Egyptians believe in aroma as medicine? Or are we simply smelling too hard? You smile. It doesn't matter. What matters is, they believed something happened. And that belief made it true. You spot a young man sitting alone at the edge of the garden. His cone is small, almost plain. But the scent that drifts from him is peculiar. Not unpleasant, just unusual. Earthy, deep, something like wet clay and ginger. You ask someone nearby. He's in mourning, they say gently. That soil of the first rain, for grief, helps ground the soul. You watch him. He doesn't speak, just sits quietly, occasionally touching his wrist to his nose. Each time his breathing slows, you look away. That scent isn't for you. Nearby, an older woman sits upright, her cone upright and untouched. She's clearly waiting, not yet ready to melt. You hear a whisper. She's fasting, spiritually. The cone only releases when she speaks. You raise an eyebrow. Later, when she leans forward and finally opens her mouth, you catch it. Burst of sage and lemon balm like a gust of clean air in a dark room. It's not subtle, it's intentional. And suddenly, you see it everywhere. A man adjusting his cone before a debate. A woman rubbing a tiny blend behind her ears before approaching a guest. A child sleeping nearby, their cone shaped like a lotus bud, scented with warm milk and chamomile. Each scent is a tool, a key, a comfort, a shield. And then, there's the flexers. You hear the laughter before you smell it. A group of nobles near the pool, passing around tiny cones as if trading rare spices. These are stunt blends. Not practical, not subtle, just outrageous. One of them leans in, proudly declaring, "This one smells like storm clouds and ambition." Another raises a cone and grins. "Rotten papyrus and sandalwood." Provocative. They're not trying to calm or heal or charm. They're trying to provoke. Because in every society, there's always someone who thinks the rules are there to be fragrantly shattered. You glance at your own wax trail, now nearly gone. The scent is faint, a whisper of what it was, and yet somehow it's stronger than ever. It's not just what it smells like, it's what it means. You didn't just wear perfume tonight. You participated in an ancient melting dialogue of memory, emotion, healing, power. And the air around you? It knows. You lean back, eyes half closed, and feel the scent settle into your skin. A soft hum of the harp. A sigh of jasmine. You don't need words anymore. Your body is speaking just fine. The night has deepened into that velvet blue stillness where even time feels like it's holding its breath. The garden is quieter now. Conversations drift in and out like smoke, and the music has softened into a lull. Just a slow, meandering, string melody, more vibration than song. You stretch your legs beneath the linen folds of your tunic, and that's when it hits you. Your cone is gone. Completely. Not a drip remains. No residual wax behind the ears. No slick trail down your collarbone. The scent lingers, of course. Faint, like an echo in a room that's just been emptied. But the crown itself? Melted into memory, and that, you realize, was always the point. Because here's the thing. In ancient Egypt, the scent wasn't meant to last. Not forever. It was supposed to fade. Like smoke after incense. Like the Nile after flood season. Like a good dream right before waking. And that, they believed, was sacred. You stand slowly and begin to wander. Not through the banquet now, but along the temple pathway, lined with lotus basins and carved pillars. You're not quite sure how you got here, but the transition feels seamless, like stepping from one room into another in a house you've always known. A priest passes silently, carrying a small brazier. The smoke curls behind him in quiet spirals. You catch a whiff, something you haven't smelled before. Not floral, not spicy. It smells like stone, like memory. You follow, because this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. You're led, not physically but through scent, into the realm of the sacred, the temples, the afterlife. Because while cones were worn in life, they were also used in death. Yes. Mourners wore cones at funerals. Priests wore cones during the opening of the mouth ritual. Even the dead themselves, especially the noble ones, were buried with wax cones pressed gently against their chests or painted on the walls of their tombs, not just for fragrance, for guidance. The belief was simple and profound. Scent was a bridge between the body and the soul, between the living and the divine, between now and forever. You step through a stone archway, and suddenly you're in a perfumery hidden beneath a temple, not opulent, but quiet, monastic. Stone bowls, bronze tools, shelves lined with clay pots sealed in wax. Two women in white linen work in tandem, crushing something, maybe flowers, maybe roots, their rhythm synchronized like prayer. One of them pauses and gestures toward a sealed jar. "That's the blend of the breathless," she murmurs. "Only used on the last night." You raise your eyebrows. "What's in it?" She smiles. "No one living knows. You don't press. Later you'll learn that some burial cones were designed to melt slowly during the funeral, their fragrance released in timed sequence. Just as the procession moved from the river to the tomb, the bass notes would begin just as the body reached the threshold, offering a final message to the gods. You imagine that moment now. A priest stepping forward, a silence in the crowd, and from the body, Not a word, not a breath, but a scent, rising like mist, spiced and warm. A fragrance the deceased wore once in life, now returned to in death. A way of saying, I remember who I was. Please do too. Some tomb inscriptions even include scent descriptions, not just what the person owned, but what they smelled like. He carried the aroma of summer rain and temple stone. She was known by her rosewood and almond presence, as if perfume could preserve a soul, and maybe it could, because unlike statues or names, scent is ephemeral. It can't be copied exactly. It can't be held, only felt. And so they sent their dead into the afterlife fragrant, as if hoping that Osiris himself might lean close, inhale, and recognize them. Of course, modern scholars argue over this. Some claim the burial cones were symbolic, never actually worn. Others insist the chemical traces found on linen wrappings prove otherwise. A few fringe voices even believe certain scents could preserve the soul's mobility in the next world. But in a way it doesn't matter. The people believed. And belief in this world is a form of perfume, invisible, potent, and lingering long after the source is gone. You walk now through a corridor of fading murals, all the painted nobles wearing their wax crowns proudly, their cones frozen mid-melt. The colors are dim, but you can still make out the shapes. The pride, the ritual. One figure looks strangely familiar. You lean closer, they're smiling softly. Their wax cone is nearly gone, just a gleam of gold at the tip. Their hand is raised, not in farewell, but in offering, and for a moment you smell something, your own scent, the one you wore tonight, still here, still lingering in stone. You close your eyes and just breathe. You emerge from the corridor of murals with a sense of quiet, as though you've stepped out of someone else's memory and into the cool hush of your own. The moon overhead has shifted. It's lower now, skimming the tops of temple spires and distant palms. Somewhere nearby, water trickles. Not from a fountain, but from a basin of oils being washed clean for tomorrow's blends. And just ahead, a garden. Not like the banquet courtyard. This one is smaller, quieter, carefully walled. Moonflowers bloom in rows, their pale petals catching the light like open hands. You step onto the stone path, and the air here is different again, cooler, more contemplative. This is where you'll learn about the people behind the scent. Because as much as pharaohs wore these wax crowns, as much as nobles flaunted their aromatic rankings, none of it would exist without the quiet hands of the temple, perfumers. And this garden, this is where they begin. You sit beneath a fig tree and watch as two apprentices kneel beside the moonflowers, collecting petals in a small bronze dish. Their movements are precise, reverent. No words, no humming, no idle talk, just the soft snip of stem from bloom. You notice something strange. As one girl leans forward, her cone wobbles slightly. It's not decorative, it's small, simple, no gold, no shimmer, and it smells unfamiliar. Like warm clay and mint and something sharply herbal. A priest notices your curiosity. He steps beside you, murmuring, "That's Clarity Blend. They wear it while preparing base oils. Keeps the mind steady." You nod, watching her work. And then, perhaps because it's quiet enough or because the scent has made you more curious than polite, you ask, "How are they chosen, the perfumers?" He doesn't answer right away. Then, "They don't choose. The scent chooses." You almost laugh. It sounds poetic, maybe too much so. But he explains. As children, they're brought into the temple garden blindfolded, given vials of raw oils one at a time, asked what they feel, not what they think it smells like, but how it lands in their chest. If they answer with colors, or shapes or memories, they're sent back. But if they answer with silence, Maya with breath, they stay. Because that's how the best begin, with instinct, with reverence. You look at the older perfumers now, not priests, not nobles, just quiet figures in plain robes seated before wide mixing tables. Their tools aren't golden. They're worn, oiled, smooth from years of use. Small pots of resin, pestles, strips of linen laid out like parchment. You expect chants or incantations, but no, just the scrape of stone on stone, the slow crush of essence. And in this room, each movement matters. Stir too fast and the oil burns. Blend at the wrong hour and the fragrance turns. There are rules. Lunar, seasonal, and sometimes inexplicably personal. One perfumer wears a cone that smells like almond and river mud. You ask why. Someone nearby shrugs. She says it helps her remember her mother's kitchen. You nod. That makes sense. You don't need science to know scent is memory's favorite disguise. The blends themselves are never named by their ingredients. That would be too easy, too mechanical. Instead, they're named by what they do. Soften grief, sharpen voice, soothe the furious, carry the child to sleep. One blend is simply called return. No one explains what it means. Another, vanishing point, used during funerals for children. You sit with that for a moment. The head perfumer enters, a man with a back bent not by age, but by care. His hands are stained faintly blue from lotus resin. When he speaks, it's to the room, but you feel like he's addressing you. Scent, he says, is what the soul leaves behind when it doesn't want to be forgotten. You close your eyes, and suddenly you remember the scent your grandmother used to wear, not perfume, not fancy. Just rice water and something from the garden. Basil, maybe. You hadn't thought about it in years, and yet now in this sacred space it rises, unbidden, as if summoned. You smile. The perfumer nods, like he knew. In the far corner, a shelf of sealed cones waits. Some are tagged with names, dates, and prayers. Others are anonymous. You ask about those. They're for the forgotten, someone answers. Burned during festivals, so that even unnamed souls can be remembered, even if just through fragrance. You pause. That's beautiful, and maybe a little tragic. The garden breeze shifts. The scent in the air changes again. You recognize the hint of your own cone from earlier, faint, fading, but still there, still. And in that moment you understand something quietly profound. These cones, these melting hats of wax and perfume aren't just about beauty or power or tradition. They are an act of offering, of memory, of presence, of saying, I was here, I felt, I loved, I lived. And even after the cone is gone, the scent remains soft, persistent, unforgettable. You linger in the garden longer than you meant to. The night has that kind of weightless stillness now, the kind that makes time feel optional. The air is heavy with memory and frankincense, and your body has become a quiet instrument for receiving both. You rise and move again, back toward the long ceremonial corridor where the banquet first began. But the celebration has slowed, slipped into its final act. Most of the cones have melted. Many guests have retreated to private chambers, but a few figures remain, reclined under awnings, murmuring softly, their wax trails glistening like the tails of comets that have already passed. And this is where you witness something you didn't expect. A miscalculation. One noble, tall, confident, too smooth for his own good, shifts in his seat, and suddenly the soft drip-drip of his cone becomes a stream. His wax wasn't blended properly. It melts too quickly now, sliding off his temple like candle wax in a furnace. It drips into his collar, onto his lap, and, unfortunately, into his goblet. The reaction is immediate. His expression shifts from composed to horrified in half. A blink. Someone snickers behind a sleeve. A servant rushes forward with cloths, but the damage is done. The scent? Overpowering now. Too sweet. Like rotten fruit smothered in syrup. What was meant to seduce now suffocates. It's a perfume disaster. You overhear a quiet remark. Ah, cone collapse. Happens to those who blend for effect, not endurance. You suppress a smile. Even in a society built around beauty and control, mistakes happen. And when they do, the lesson lingers, just like a bad scent. Later, you learn that cone collapse is more common than people admit. There are scrolls warning against overmixing, cautioning that ego is the enemy of evaporation. Some cones were rushed through production, thrown together without prayer or patience. The result? Disaster in the form of waxy puddles and unsolicited coughing fits. There's even a satire poem, found in a noble's tomb, about a man whose cone fell off during a royal audience and landed directly in the Pharaoh's wine. He was never seen again, possibly executed, or worse, shunned from every banquet for the rest of his life. But not all meltdowns were accidents. Some were designed. You're led later into a small annex room. It's darker here, quieter. And the cones? They're different, asymmetrical, layered with alternating bands of color and scent. One looks like a spiral of obsidian and ivory wax. Another is shaped like a flame, sharp and pointed. These, a priestess whispers, are ritual cones. You take a slow breath. The scent in here is heavier, denser. It clings to your skin like silk soaked in wine and smoke. These cones weren't meant for parties or politics. They were used during eclipses, during plagues, during coronations and curses. Each blend was meant to invoke something or someone. One, known as Sister of Storms, was said to awaken ancestral memory. Another, Bloodroot's Edge, was worn by warriors before battle, melted and painted across their foreheads like sigils. And then there's Whispering Palm, used only once per year, during the Feast of Silence. A scent so faint, so subtle you had to hold your breath just to detect it. These were not decorative, they were dangerous. Some legends claim that one cone, never named aloud, could bring visions if inhaled during a thunderstorm. A blend, so potent it was locked in a stone box and buried beneath the Temple of Thoth. The gods smelled it first, they say, and wept. No one knows if it's real. But again, the story itself is perfume, invisible, spreading, unforgettable. Back at the banquet, someone has recovered from their cone mishap by switching to a simpler blend. You catch a faint note of honey and ash, a humble reset. It works. The laughter resumes. The noble's pride, while dented, is intact enough to smile again. You sip a final cup of wine, now scented with traces of 20 different waxes. The cup tastes like history, like laughter, like a library on fire, burning one scroll at a time. And as the last of the guests rise and bow, trailing the ghosts of their cones behind them, you realize you've reached the edge of something. Not the end, but the point where scent becomes story, where wax becomes memory, where what melts remains. You step outside again into the open air. The stars are lower now, and the night smells like nothing at all. The sky is ink and quiet. The scent of the night has thinned to a bare trace like a distant echo of music you're no longer sure you heard, or just imagined. Your steps are slow now, not because you're tired, but because the world itself seems to have slowed around you. Like the wind, like time, like wax just before it hardens for good. You've wandered from the banquet, from the temple garden, from the perfumer's sanctum. You're walking along the edge of the palace now, where scent trails don't linger, and where the air smells only of stone and moonlight. And here, on this quiet path lined with statues of forgotten nobles, you come across a small alcove. You might have missed it if the breeze hadn't shifted, because here someone has lit a cone, but not just any cone. This one is shaped like a tear, longer, more delicate than the others, almost translucent. The scent is hard to describe. It's not strong, not sharp, just honest. You smell crushed fig leaves, old parchment, sandalwood worn smooth by hands that loved too much. You pause. A woman sits on a low stone bench nearby. Her robe is plain. No jewelry, no attendants. Just her and the cone. She doesn't look up but speaks softly. You've smelled every room tonight but this one. You nod. She's not wrong. You sit beside her. She smiles faintly. This cone is called What Could Have Been. You don't ask why. She continues. It's worn by those who missed their moment, or believe they did. The wax drips slowly, curling at the base of her neck like a question mark. The scent changes as it melts. Not in layers like the others, just in weight. It starts light, almost playful, lemon blossom and sun-dried linen, and then deepens into something heavier. Pine, leather, dried rose petals left too long in. A book you meant to finish. You breathe in, and your chest aches a little. Some cones aren't meant to impress. They're meant to remember. She tells you, quietly, that this blend is reserved for those who once held power but stepped aside, or were pushed, or simply drifted. Former priestesses, retired scribes, lovers who became strangers. Every year they gather here to wear it, just once, to remind themselves that the story didn't end where they thought it would. Some guests return every year, some never do. You realize then the cone is a kind of confession, a scented soliloquy. You sit in silence for a while, letting the scent fill the space between you. It doesn't demand anything. It just is. It holds its place with quiet dignity, and that's rare. Eventually the cone melts fully, and the woman rises. She nods to you, and for the first time you catch a glimpse of something under her sleeve. A small mark inked onto her wrist. A temple sigil. She was once a high perfumer. You don't say a word. She's already gone. You stay in the alcove alone for a few minutes, watching the last curl of smoke rise from the stone. And for the first time, you understand. These cones aren't just about fragrance, or status, or ritual. They're language. A language for the things we can't say out loud. Longing, regret, resilience, devotion. You think back to the young man with soil of the first rain, mourning in silence. To the couple composing scents together like music. To the collapsed cone, and the noble who laughed anyway. To the children in the garden, blindfolded, asked to name a feeling. Scent is what happens when words fail. And here, tonight, surrounded by wax and wind and stars, the world speaks. Back you breathe and listen. You leave the alcove slowly, your steps quiet now, like you don't want to interrupt the stillness that settled over the night. The scent of what could have been lingers faintly on your robe, mixing with the final notes of your own cone. A soft whisper of plum and ash that now feels like an echo of someone else's story, or maybe your own. The path curves and leads you back toward the Nile. The river is dark, vast and silent, a ribbon of ink stretching toward the horizon. You stand near the edge, and for the first time all night, there's no scent in the air. Not even the usual water lilies or river silt. Just clean, neutral stillness. And in that blankness, you begin to understand why pharaohs loved the cones so much. Because for all their splendor and temples and scrolls, they were still human. And humans fear silence. Not just the absence of Dunishi, but the silence of being forgotten. Scent was their answer to that. Perfume as presence. You imagine now a young pharaoh preparing for a festival, not with war paint or declarations, but with a cone. A blend chosen not to intimidate, but to evoke, to soften his image, to perfume the crowd's memory. Because what they remember, that's the real power, isn't it? You see it in your mind's eye. The ruler stepping out into the sun, cone freshly lit. The first note a burst of cool citrus. As he walks among his people, the cone melts and the scent shifts to cedar, to cardamom, to something sacred. Hours later, when he's long gone, the scent still hangs in the air like a ghost that smiles. This was empire too. Not just stone and conquest, but smell. Carefully curated, released drop by drop like a poem read aloud. And just like that, you realize every pharaoh had a signature scent. Not one written on tablets, not chiseled into tombs, but remembered by those who stood near. Priests, lovers, enemies, each of them carrying it if only for a moment. And perhaps deep in the folds of linen shrouds, in tombs still unopened, that scent remains. Your thoughts drift back to the banquet earlier, the swirl of perfumes, the power plays in wax and oil. But this is something else. This is quieter, older, because when the cones are gone, what's left? Memory, scent, and silence. You walk now along the riverbank and find an old stone bench. Someone has left a cone burning there, unattended. supervised. Its scent is strange, unfamiliar. It smells like open doors and paper and something slightly metallic, like the hush before a storm. A blend you've never encountered all night. A tag is etched on the stone beside it. One simple "wah" word begin, you sit and inhale. It hits you all at once. This cone is designed not for endings but for awakenings. It's what they burn before a birth, before a coronation, before the first day of a festival that hasn't yet begun. A scent of possibility. And suddenly, the night feels less final, less like a closing curtain, and more like a soft breath before the next line is spoken. You think of the perfumers again, quietly working in the dark, stirring oil, whispering to herbs, grinding resins by moonlight, blending futures, one scent at a time. And for just a moment, the world feels infinite, like it's waiting for your next step, your next word, your next scent. You stay seated by the Nile for a while longer, letting the begin blend rise and fall around you like a tide. It doesn't demand attention, it invites it, gently, curiously, like a door slightly ajar in a house you forgot you'd once lived. And there's something youthful about the scent, not childish but open. The top note is green, not the green of grass, but of things that haven't yet bloomed. There's a whisper of citrus rind, maybe unripe fig and something else. A crisp mineral undercurrent, like rain hitting sun-baked stone. It makes you think of first chances, or last chances disguised as new ones. This is the blend they give to initiates on their first day in the temple. The cone worn not for others but for the self, a private ceremony for becoming. You watch the wax slide down the bench's edge and pool like mercury near your sandals. There's a fullness to it. You wonder if you should move. You don't. You just breathe. And that's when you hear them. Bells. Faint. Metallic. Not loud enough to call anyone, but distinct. You turn your head toward the sound and see 3 figures walking along the far path. Their robes are trimmed with threads soaked in oil, not for ornament, but to carry fragrance through movement. Their cones are lit, low and faintly glowing with bluish smoke. You recognize the bells now? These are harbingers, scent bearers who announce arrivals. Not people, moments. They walk ahead of declarations, behind omens, alongside vows. You've heard of them. Most people never see them. Only the shift in air they leave behind. Tonight their cones trail myrrh of the morning before, a rare blend used only when something old has ended and something unnamed is about to begin. You rise. From the bench, you don't follow them, but their scent follows you. It wraps around your wrist like a ribbon, ties something invisible to your breath. A note, a message, a whisper you don't yet understand. You walk again. Through a hallway of date palms, past a quiet market whose stalls have all closed but whose baskets still smell of cardamom and dried fig. The world is winding down, but also winding up. It's that in-between hour. And then you enter a room without walls. It's more of a space, really. A square. Courtyard open to the stars, ringed with small lanterns. A brazier burns at the center. Low cushions circle it like petals. No one else is here, but a single cone waits, placed neatly on a polished slab of obsidian. It's darker than the night around it, almost black, but with veins of silver that catch the firelight when you lean in. No name, no markings, you recognize it anyway. The cone of closure. You sit before it. You don't light it yet. You study it. It's heavier than the others. Not physically, emotionally. You've seen references to it in temple scrolls, always mentioned in the same breath as funerals, final harvests, last chapters, but also births, new calendars, moments when the breath of one thing becomes the seed of another. And tonight, this cone is yours. You light it. There's no hiss, no sudden plume. The scent rises slowly, like fog across a warm floor. You catch sandalwood first, then something darker, oud maybe, or old ink. You hear the river even though you're no longer near it. You feel linen on your skin, wax on your neck, ghosts of earlier scents, ones you thought had faded, return and swirl softly behind your ears. This cone doesn't overwrite them. It gathers them, carries them. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you feel like you're standing in every room of the night at once. Banquet, temple, garden, river, chamber, silence. Each scent a sentence, each breath a chapter. And here, now, under the stars, you turn the final page. The wax pools, the scent deepens, and the air begins to hush. The scent thickens like dusk falling behind your eyes. It's gentle but insistent, a blend that doesn't ask for attention so much as hold it. You breathe through your nose, slow and deliberate, as though you're trying not just to inhale, but to remember. The cone of closure is working. You feel it in the way your shoulders settle, in the long breath that stays in your chest before letting go, in how your fingers unclench from thoughts you didn't realize they were holding. The scent has reached its middle now, the heart note. It's warm, resinous, comforting. Like papyrus warmed by sun, the faintest trace of cinnamon smoke curling from a priest's robe. You could swear you smell ink, old ink, the kind that stains the hands of scribes and tells stories even in silence. You sit by the flame, and for the first time tonight, you realize how much you've collected. Not objects, not knowledge, moments. You've smelled ambition melt down someone's neck like courage turned liquid. You've seen heartbreak captured in cones with names like Vanishing Point and What Could Have Been. You've watched power shimmer in the air, not as gold or steel, but as cardamom and blue lotus and something ancient no one can name but everyone feels. And now, here, as your cone glows with its slow silvery burn, you feel all of it distilling. The cone is nearing its final melt, and so are you. A breeze moves through the courtyard. You expect it to carry away the scent, but instead it carries new ones toward you. Faint trails of every cone from earlier, ghost scents wandering back in for one final breath. Soil of the yew, first rain, rain of bastet, rebirth blend. Begin. They don't overpower each other. They braid. They remember, and you sit quietly in their midst, like a page at the end of a scroll that never needed writing in ink, only in wax and breath. Then, just as the cone reaches its final pool of melt, something unexpected happens. The bass note arrives. It's not dramatic. It's barely there, but it changes everything. You smell cedar that's been rained on, followed by the trace of cooled fire. Then something softer, the inside of a chest where linens have been folded for years. There's a sweetness too. Not sugar, but time. Like honey that's forgotten it was ever new. And underneath it all, a scent you can't quite name because it isn't a scent. It's a feeling that you are safe, that you are home, that you are already becoming whatever comes next. The wax flickers one last time, the scent stills. You stay seated, not out of duty, but gratitude, because what the cone of closure teaches is simple. What melts is never lost. It just changes shape, and what lingers is not residue. It's memory made gentle enough to carry. You look up at the stars, silent, unchanged, and for the first time you don't feel like you need to chase anything. You've arrived. Here, now, waxless, weightless, still, and slowly, without a sound, the cone goes out. There's no ceremony to mark the moment, no trumpet, no final chant, just you and the warm obsidian slab, cooling now in the night air. The scent has faded so subtly you didn't notice when it stopped. The wax has stilled into its final form, a shallow pool with a shimmer like morning dew on dark stone. You trace its edge with your eyes, not your fingers. Some things are not meant to be touched. You inhale again, reflexively, but all that remains is air, clean, quiet, honest. You've been scented for hours, layered in history and longing and wit and quiet power, and now, without realizing it, you've arrived at something closer to your own breath. You close your eyes and let it out slowly. The silence hums, and then footsteps, bare, soft. You don't turn, a figure sits across from you. No cone, No robe, just presence. You say nothing, they do too. Together you stare into the empty brazier, its coals soft red, like the last notes of a lullaby still glowing in the dark. You begin to understand something unspoken. This person, this presence, isn't here to teach or tell or explain. They are here to witness, because that's what comes after closure, not forgetting, but being witnessed. Your journey, through banquet and perfume palaces, temple gardens and riverside, benches, rituals, and regrets, was not lost in the melting. It has been absorbed, seen, held. The figure offers you a new cone, smaller, thinner, cool to the touch, no tag, no name. Just a look that says, you'll know what to do with it when the time is right. You take it gently and feel the weight shift from ending to beginning. Not loud, not urgent, just present. Because that's the true art of the wax crown, knowing when to melt and when to reform, when to linger, and when to leave only warmth behind. You stand, not to leave, but to carry forward. As you turn from the courtyard, the coals behind you dim into ash. But you don't feel loss. You feel the hush of completion, like the final word at the end of a very old book, the kind you only read once but smell again for years. You walk slowly. Each step is soft, grounded, and somewhere in the folds of your robe the new cone rests. Not for tonight, but for someday. A breath of wax, yet unlit. A scent that hasn't introduced itself. A story waiting to exhale. Now, your pulse slows. Your breath deepens, and the air grows still. You feel your body sink into softness when, wherever you are, as the echoes of Egypt slip into mist. The cones have all burned. The night is quiet. The temple has closed its eyes. The stories have been told. And the scent remains only in memory. Now let it fade, let it all drift into the hush. You've carried enough. It's time to rest.